After John's death, I was at the hillside with Brian Patrick Higgins.
This was a confrontation between Brian Albert
Yes.
and Tom Beatty.
Following the trial, Mr. Albert ran into Brian Higgins at a local Harbor Freight hardware store.
Can you imagine this? The other Brian Albert,
Yes.
goes to meet with Brian Tully. Let's see what this big dope has to say. This is the first digitally enhanced picture, and clearly that is Brian Patrick Higgins with his shield turned to the side.
The defendant kissed me.
How did she kiss you?
Not like a friend.
Lip to lip, is that fair to say?
Yes.
And what was your reaction to that?
I was taken back.
This is Lieutenant Brian Tully. Brian Tully, T-U-L-L-Y.
There he is, Brian Tully from the Massachusetts State Troopers. He has since retired, but at this time, he was in charge of most of the troopers investigating the death of John O'Keefe. However, thanks to the new FOIA productions, we are learning more and more about what his role was with regard to accepting all these crybaby complaints from various witnesses in the death of John O'Keefe. Today, we are going to review two more additional complaints, one from Brian Patrick Higgins and another from Brian Albert. Let's watch.
On March 25th, 2025, I submitted the following report to Captain Bruce O'Rourke, Unit Commander of the Norfolk SPDU, regarding photographs provided by Brian Higgins in Commonwealth versus Reed. On Friday, March 21st, 2025, I was contacted by Brian Higgins.
Brian Higgins?
Mr. Higgins stated he had photographs he wanted to give investigators regarding Commonwealth versus Reed. I met with Mr. Higgins at the offices of the Norfolk State Police Detective Unit that same day. Mr. Higgins provided two photographs. Copies are attached to this report. He stated the photographs were taken at the wake of John O'Keefe on February 6th, 2022.
Unbelievable. We know that Brian Patrick is a huge fan of all the shows involving the death of John O'Keefe, specifically Microdots, and of course our good buddy, the real man JFK over there. Higgins is such a huge fan, he even called into the show using an alias, Kevin from South Boston.
Frequently refer to me as Kevin from South Boston.
Kevin from South Boston.
You sound like Higgins, bro.
You wrong.
As we've seen in the previous video, Brian Patrick never denied being the one that called in under the name Kevin from South Boston.
Kevin from South Boston.
And I don't blame him. JFK is a real man. He hangs out with other strong men. They have tools, welding hats, and all other stuff that real men would have. And I don't even know what any of that stuff does. However, Brian Patrick is clearly a fan, and now he wants to show the world that he was at John O'Keefe's funeral. During this time, various shows were claiming that Brian Patrick failed to show up to John O'Keefe's wake and or funeral. We know that Hen McCabe had testified the last time she saw Brian Patrick was at John O'Keefe's wake. There is no confirmation whether or not he went to the funeral. However, Brian Patrick is such a thin-skinned, low-cow baby, he actually took the time to go to a Massachusetts State Trooper and present him with pictures proving he was at the wake. As I've said before, most people cannot handle being a public figure. My good buddy AJ Benza always said that fame is a bitch, and he's 100% right. I know that Brian Patrick did not want to be in the public spotlight. However, because of his actions, because he killed John O'Keefe on that fateful morning, he is now a public figure, and he just simply can't handle it. You cannot go around answering every baseless claim made about you on the internet. That means you're a true low-cow. Low-cow is someone that you can actually milk for laughs. You tell them one thing that's fake, and they go crazy. They start blocking. You've seen it even with some of these law tubers. You cannot respond to every baseless allegation, but that's exactly what Brian Patrick Higgins is doing here. He's literally bringing pictures of him at the wake to Brian Tully to prove that he was there. Of course, it doesn't prove that he didn't kill John O'Keefe. It just proves that he was at the wake. Let's look at them.
The photographs appear to be of the same photo, with one being more zoomed in than the other. Respectfully submitted, Brian Tully.
And there they are, the two pictures that big old baby Brian Patrick Higgins brought to Tully's office to prove he was at the wake. And it does show that Brian Patrick was standing in a line next to a woman and some cops. It doesn't prove that he was actually at the wake, but let's enhance them and see if we can see anything. This is the first digitally enhanced picture, and clearly that is Brian Patrick Higgins with his shield turned to the side and a black line over it. But of course, he's the reason that every single officer is standing there, because he's the only one that had means, motive, and opportunity to kill John O'Keefe on that fateful morning. But for some reason, he thought it would be beneficial to him to bring two photos depicting him standing at the wake. Big Baby's second picture was just a zoomed in copy of the original. Of course, it just shows him standing in a line next to police officers. It doesn't really show us exactly how, when, and where this picture was taken, but the one thing we're sure of, we know exactly how, when, and where he killed John O'Keefe. And of course, he's the cause for everyone standing there. It makes no difference whether or not he showed up to the wake or not. It makes a difference whether or not he was there, whether he had the opportunity to kill John O'Keefe, and of course he did.
This is Lieutenant Brian Tully, badge number 3520, Norfolk County State Police Detective Unit. On March 29th, 2025, I submitted the following report to Captain Bruce O'Rourke, Unit Commander of the Norfolk SPDU, regarding a meeting with Brian Albert in Commonwealth versus Reed. On March 28th, 2025, Brian Albert attended a meeting at the Norfolk District Attorney's Office with Attorney Greg Henning.
Can you imagine this? The other Brian Albert.
Yes.
Goes to meet with Brian Tully. Let's see what this big dope has to say.
Also present for the meeting were Special Assistant District Attorney Hank Brennan, Victim Advocate Steve Nelson, and myself.
It still kills me that Brian Albert and Brian Higgins were assigned a victim advocate, especially since we know for certain old Brian Patrick Higgins was the one that killed John.
Mr. Albert stated he had not communicated with Brian Higgins for many months leading up to the first trial of Commonwealth versus Reed. Following the trial, Mr. Albert ran into Brian Higgins at a local Harbor Freight hardware store. He recalled that he saw Mr. Higgins one additional time. He stated he has exchanged text messages with Mr. Higgins since those encounters.
There's so much to unpack with those statements. Of course, leading up to the trial, they probably colluded and said, let's not talk to each other that much because we're going to be the two main suspects. Now we hear that he met with Brian Patrick Higgins at a place called Harbor Freight hardware store. Of course, I don't know what goes on in hardware stores. I know real men go there and get tools and equipment and all that stuff. However, was it planned that both of these Brians would meet there to discuss in person their strategy for the actual trial? Or was it simply pure coincidence like the 2:22 a.m. phone calls between the two Brians? I don't know. Let's keep watching.
Mr. Albert recalled the time that he was at the Hillside Pub with Mr. Higgins sometime after John O'Keefe's death. He stated a person he knew from Canton and considered a friend, Tom Beatty, was at the pub and began staring at him.
Wow, check this out. Tom Beatty, as you know, was friends with John O'Keefe, and he's been confronted by Hen McCabe and Matt McCabe at various sporting events for which their kids participate in.
Keep walking. Just keep walking. Nobody wants you here. Let's go.
Still got everybody around you, right?
Go be by yourself.
Now it appears that old Tom Beatty was staring down Brian Albert, and of course we know that Big Baby can't accept the fact that he is considered a prime suspect in the death of John O'Keefe. So Brian Albert confronts Tom Beatty at the Hillside, the very bar where Brian Patrick Higgins first laid eyes on Karen Reed, and as he admitted in subsequent texts, that's the exact time from the jump he fell in love with Karen Reed. Let's keep listening.
Mr. Albert approached Mr. Beatty to ask him if everything was okay. Mr. Beatty was with a couple. Mr. Albert also knows from Canton the Currans. Mr. Albert and Mr. Curran went outside to talk, and Mr. Higgins stayed inside the pub.
Apparently, Brian Patrick Higgins is just as big as a coward as I am, staying inside the pub when two men claim they're going to go outside and quote-unquote talk. We all know in the white suburbs, that means you're going outside to fight. For some reason, guys love to say, let's go outside and fight, rather than handling their business right where they are. And we know this wasn't a casual, friendly meeting to talk outside. This was a confrontation between Brian Albert
Yes.
and Tom Beatty. No doubt about it.
The topic of the conversation was the death of John O'Keefe and the resulting criminal trial. Mr. Beatty stated something is weird and mentioned Colin Albert. Mr. Albert and Mr. Beatty then went back into the pub. Mr. Beatty and the Currans left a short time later. Mr. Albert stated that Mr. Higgins did not know the Currans or Mr. Beatty.
Not sure if that statement is true because it did appear that Brian Patrick Higgins was hanging out with John Karen and the Currans at previous events.
Mr. Albert further stated that Mr. Beatty has confronted other people about the death of John O'Keefe and the criminal trial. Respectfully submitted, Brian Tully.
Make no doubt about it, this is Brian Albert's attempt to have his critics silenced.
Yes.
He doesn't really fear Tom Beatty. What he's trying to do is have him arrested under the same bullshit statute that Turtle Boy was arrested for, witness intimidation. There is no intimidation here. We know most likely Brian Albert was the one that was saying, come outside. This was not a friendly thing. And we know he's not intimidated by Tom Beatty. Even I'm not afraid of Tom Beatty. However, it's so critical to understand the psyche of these guilty parties now. Because Hen McCabe was successful in having Turtle Boy arrested, now the group is colluding and saying, hey, if you make a complaint claiming that you're in fear for your life, they will arrest your critics. And we saw that with Brian Patrick Higgins trying to arrest JFK, the dude from Microdots, and some other law tubers just because he's receiving some criticism online.
After John's death, I was at the hillside with Brian Patrick Higgins. Tom Beatty was staring at me. I approached Beatty and asked him if everything was okay.
These are the handwritten notes taken by Tully during that meeting with Brian Albert, narrated by Brian Albert. Let's listen.
Beatty was with the Currans. I thought I was friends with Beatty. We went outside and started talking about Commonwealth versus Reed. Beatty said, something is weird. Beatty mentioned Colin. Then I went back inside. Tom was inside the bar and the Currans left. Brian Patrick Higgins did not go outside. I did not know the Currans. I did not know Beatty. I know John and Karen. Beatty has confronted other people regarding Reed. After the first trial, I saw Brian Higgins at a Harbor Freight hardware store. I saw him one other time. I have had text communications with him since these encounters.
And that admission by Brian Albert that he's texting with Brian Higgins is critical. Of course, we know these two are smart enough not to incriminate themselves now, but they couldn't resist themselves on that fateful morning. Recall that Brian Higgins texts John O'Keefe, you coming here, not are you coming here, sir? You coming here, followed by 3 question marks. He should have never done that because of the 10 potential people in the entire world that could have killed John O'Keefe. There was only one big boy taunting him just minutes before John died. If Brian Patrick would, he would take that text message back. And it just so happens at 2:22 on that very morning, Brian Albert and Brian Higgins are communicating via telephone calls to each other. These calls weren't between little Colin Albert or whoever else. Of the 10 potential people living on the earth that could have killed John O'Keefe, 2 of them were talking to each other on the phone at 2:22 on the very morning for which John was killed. As they say in murder investigations, there are no coincidences, and here it is clear to see something was up between these two, and it wasn't until the FBI investigation revealed that these two were actually speaking with each other that we learned that they actually did. And that is critical because if you're an innocent party, most likely you're not speaking with someone else that could have killed John O'Keefe. So it's critical now in all the pending lawsuits that you get all the communications between Brian Albert and Brian Higgins from that very morning, and of course all subsequent communications. But no matter how many law tubers Brian Patrick Higgins and Brian Albert complain about, we will never ever stop producing these videos until the real killer,
Brian Higgins,
is brought to justice. This crime was very simple to solve because it took place within a very small area over a very short period of time with a very limited amount of suspects. One or more of these 10 people has to be the killer of John O'Keefe. That's how easy this is. Once you remove the kids and the McCabe's, you're down to just 3 suspects: Brian Albert, Higgy Bear, and Chloe. Since Chloe's a good dog, she didn't do it.
I didn't do it. I'm a good dog. I didn't do it.
So that leaves just 2 suspects, Brian Albert and Higgy Bear. But of the 2 Brians, only one had the means, motive, and opportunity to kill John O'Keefe. And that's our old cuddly but violent Higgy Bear. Once we had all the facts and didn't jump to conclusions, do you see how easy it was to solve this crime?
the defendant kissed me,
How did she kiss you?
not like a friend.
Lip to lip, is that fair to say?
Yes.
And what was your reaction to that?
I was taken back.